The following is a Shaw TV Public Affairs presentation. Constituency Report is produced as a public service by members of the BC Legislature through the facilities of Shaw TV.
Hello and welcome to Shaw Constituency Report. I'm your host, Jeff Dean, and I'm here speaking with Ravi Kahlon, the MLA for Delta North. Welcome to the show, Ravi.
Hey, Jeff. Nice. It's been seen the show many times, so it's nice to actually be in this cool little studio today.
Yeah, great. Well, I wanted to start off with a question about just your strategy for being an MLA. You were elected for the first time this year. And I just wonder if you could tell the audience how you keep in contact with your constituents, how you make yourself available to them.
Yeah. Well, when I first ran, the whole idea of running was to, because I believe that the MLA and that office is about connecting people, and it's about building. It has an important role in building community, and so with that lens is how our office has been running. I've got some great people that are working with me, and in the early days of government, we're here in Victoria quite often, so you really have to depend on your staff to help ensure that many of the people that come into your office have the things that they need. And so first off, I want to give them a special shout out because they do excellent work in the community, and I'm very active on social media, and I find that majority of the people that want to reach out to me just send me a message. And they, the feedback I've gotten so far is they like the fact that it's me responding to them as opposed to someone else. So I think it's important to have that relationship with people. Of course, it's challenging as well, and most MLAs will say that being away from your community for 4 or 5 days a week, and then on top of that with other responsibilities. But I think it's critically important that when we are back, that we're very much in the community at the events so that they can find us accessible.
Okay. Are there any, what kind of issues are important in your community, or are there any projects that you're working on in Delta North? Well,
when I first became the MLA, I was thinking like, what are the things we need to get done in this community? And I was very pleased in September, the first week of September, where we were able to seismically upgrade a school in my community, and it was the last remaining school in our riding that needed seismic upgrading. So we got that done. There's several issues that come up consistently within our community. We're uniquely positioned, lots of traffic coming through our community. People are going through to get to major access points, Alex Fraser Bridge in particular, also towards Patello Bridge. And so traffic usually is a big issue. The community is going through some changes. There's lots of new construction, and with that comes some normal challenges as well. So there's just like every community we face in our region, we face similar challenges. The opioid crisis is affecting our community. There's many parents that have concerns for their kids, and I've been hearing that. Education, people want better services available for their kids, and throughout the even up to the election to now, people are struggling. And they're finding the costs are going up, and they're looking for government to ensure that life is a little bit more affordable for them.
Well, since you brought up transportation, I was going to ask about the Alex Fraser Bridge. I understand there's some changes coming to the Alex Fraser Bridge. Do you want to tell people about that?
Well, the people in North Delta will see the construction actively happening right now. There's an interchange project happening on the 72nd and Highway 99. That project is very much in process. It was something that started actually before our government even came in place. And there's a new overpass being built. So there is some disruption for people's regular travel while that construction is happening. And I've been trying to keep people apprised to the changes and closures through social media, and on top of that, we had ice bombs on Alex Fraser Bridge, and I've had people come to me and say, I've never seen that. I've been in this community for so many years. I've never seen ice bombs coming down Alex Fraser Bridge, and partly, climate change is real, and so we always think about climate change in different contexts, but here's an opportunity for us to think about it in real terms in our community, and so how do we respond to that? How do we ensure that people who are commuting to work aren't seriously injured? And so what we've just recently done is we've announced that there will be a new collar system being built for the bridge, so that so the snow doesn't accumulate. And so we've put out a RFP for companies to bid, and now we've chosen a company that will start work very soon on a collar system that will ensure that we don't have more ice bombs, and people can go to work and come home safely.
And they're building a counterflow lane too,
yes,
right?
So the people of Delta and people coming through Delta from South Surrey and so on will see an additional lane being put onto Alex Fraser. So we're going to be trying to get the most we can out of that bridge, and so it'll be a counterflow lane, which will, in the mornings it'll be an extra lane for people coming out of North Delta going into Vancouver, and then in the evenings it'll be an extra lane coming back. So we're hoping that will ease some of the congestion. I think the numbers came out from Ministry of Transportation that the amount of people traveling through the tunnel and traveling over Alex Fraser Bridge has come down slightly, and of course there's a lot more people going over Port Mann because we removed the tolls, but we're seeing what we thought we would see, which is the traffic being spread out more across all the bridges that link us to Burnaby and Vancouver, and so we are seeing a slight decrease in both the bridges, and I think that gives us a little bit of time to put in real solutions. And I think real solutions are transit. We can build bridges all day long, as many as we want, but at the end of the day, they still got to go to another traffic point. And so, are we just moving traffic congestion to another place? Is something that we need to think about as government, as municipal leaders, as federal leaders. And so, I think those conversations are happening, and we've made a strong commitment to that.
Well, that brings up another question. The NDP government has delayed the replacement of the George Massey Tunnel.
Yes.
Can you tell us why the delay and what's the plan going forward?
Well, the Minister of Transportation has said that she wants to ensure that there's an assessment done of the proposal to make sure it's the right fit for the region, because traffic isn't, these solutions aren't just about one community, they're about the region. We have to think about what happens when the traffic goes over that bridge. Is the grid, the region, able to handle that load coming through that fast? So these are things that we have to think through. I've heard from the Liberals, BC Liberals, that we should have this done, and we've studied it, and we've talked to people. And at the same time, I hear them say, "Why do you keep talking to people?" And so, I think it's important to do that consultation. There were many people not happy with the announcement when it happened, and it's important to hear their voices before we go ahead with a project. We acknowledge that there's congestion there. We acknowledge that there needs to be something done. I've sat through that traffic. It's my community, but at the same time, we want to make sure it's the right solution that fits for the entire region. And so if it takes us a little bit of time to think that through, then there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, the federal government said no. The last government asked the federal government to chip into the project, and the federal government said no, that we don't want to be contributing to this, and it didn't fit within their vision of how traffic should go. So we want to make sure we consult with everyone. And last thing I would say is that we see with the BC Utilities Commission doing a review of Site C, and then we hear 20 to 30 to 40% over budget. And so, those are red flags. Those are red flags that this previous government that was here for 16 years, maybe perhaps weren't sharing all the facts with us. So I think it's a prudent thing for us to go through the numbers, have some people look at it, give us independent view on the project and the costing of it, and then proceed from there.
Okay. Now, you are also the Parliamentary Secretary for Sport and Multiculturalism. Part of your responsibility is to lead a consultation on Human Rights Commission.
Yeah.
Can you tell the audience what is a Human Rights Commission and why do you think BC needs one?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think that, well, first off, we haven't had a Human Rights Commission in this province for 15 years. We're the only jurisdiction in Canada that does not have a Human Rights Commission. We have a tribunal system. The tribunal system is, the best way to describe it, it's a court system, but the best way to describe it is the tribunal system is the doctor's office. And the Human Rights Commission works to make sure people don't get sick. So what we're hoping with the commission is that it looks at systematic discrimination before it happens. And so the Premier announced that we will be having a Human Rights Commission, and the Attorney General has asked me to ensure that whatever proposal comes forward works for people of British Columbia. I mean, it's about the people of British Columbia and their needs. And so I've had the public consultation just ended actually on Friday. 7 weeks, over 120 face-to-face meetings with individuals and groups. I've traveled the province. It's taken up a lot of time. Tuesday to Friday, I had 37 meetings. But every meeting is important. And what I've found is that after every meeting, I feel reinvigorated because people in this province are struggling, and many are facing discrimination, and many are, having access issues to hospitals, schools, whether with people with disabilities are having issues. LGBTQ community faces discrimination. So it was fascinating for me to hear those stories, and so what I'm doing now is going through all the reports that have been written. And I'll be drafting up a report which will be sent to the Attorney General by the end of the year, so that the Attorney General can turn that around and put a Human Rights Commission in place that works for the people of British Columbia. Again, it's a commitment we made, which is improving the services that people depend on, and I think this is a critical service for the public.
Okay. And you're also the other Parliamentary Secretary for Multiculturalism, and I saw that the government gave some grants out to multicultural organizations that are promoting multicultural understanding. Can you tell us what kind of organizations are these and what kind of work are they doing?
Well, I would say, I'd like to start off by saying that we have identified that the province needs to play a more active role on anti-racism initiatives. Partly the challenge coming from our neighbors down south. There's been, and some elements of Europe, we've seen a rise of tension and racism, percolating up, and we're not immune to it here in Canada. It exists, racism exists, and so we start off acknowledging that. And so what we have now in BC, what we've just rolled out is an anti-racism network in the province. And this is communities from all jurisdictions throughout the province, which municipalities are signing up for. And it's a network that connects all these groups so that they can communicate with each other, and at the same time they can start talking about what strategies that they're doing to address these issues before they happen. And so we announced $250,000 of grants to communities throughout the province, and those are various amounts of money for different community groups that have applied. Some are doing film screenings to educate about different cultures in their community. Some are doing events with partnership with First Nations to tell stories about immigration, tell stories about Indigenous people who've been here for many years, millennia. And so we're really trying to build bridges amongst communities, and this grant is a starting of that process.
Great. So speaking of human rights and multiculturalism, you recently made a statement in the legislature about violence against Sikhs.
Yeah.
Excuse me, is it Sikhs or
yeah,
Sikhs?
Sikh.
Sikh.
Good, yeah.
You made a statement about violence against Sikhs
Yeah.
in 1984, an incident that happened in India.
Yeah.
Sikhs in Canada are very concerned about this. Can you say why are they concerned, and also what's their response to this?
Yeah, well, it was a moving thing for me to be able to do. Of course, my main concern and preoccupation is my community and people in North Delta. But this is a significant moment in the history of my community as well. And so I wanted to take a moment to highlight that. And for those that don't know the history, in 1984, Indira Gandhi was the prime minister, and she was assassinated. And at that time, what happened was political figures basically took out voter lists and gave them out to mobs of people, and they went house by house in Delhi and killing Sikh women, children, men. It was a very dark chapter of the history of our community, of India, as well as many people here who had family members there are deeply affected. To date, no people have been charged or caught, and although people know who they are, they're roaming free. And so what was moving for me was a group of activists in 1999 got together and said, well, how do we recognize this moment in time? Jewish community's been doing the same thing around Kristallnacht, where systematically Jewish community was targeted in Europe and Germany in particular. So they've been looking at initiatives. So how do we do that for our community? And what they decided to do was to do a blood drive. They said, we're going to bring the community together, we're going to do a blood drive, and we're going to save lives here in Canada. At the same time, we're going to highlight this injustice. And so it started off with
a symbolic gesture.
It's a symbolic gesture. It started off with one clinic, and now Canadian Blood Services has said this is their single largest blood drive campaign in the country. And they've gone now international. Clinics all across the country are doing it. And it's not only Sikhs or people from the Sikh community, it's everybody now is starting to participate in the campaign. And so it was a powerful thing, and I felt it was a nice opportunity to highlight this important work that these people are doing.
Great. Well, I think we have to go to a break now. During the break, some information about how you can get into contact with Ravi will be shown on the screen. And we'll be back to continue our discussion in a moment. Hi, welcome back to Constituency Report. I'm your host, Jeff Dean, here talking with Ravi Kahlon, the MLA for Delta North. We're going to continue our discussion. I'd like to go back to the Human Rights Commission. What are you hearing out there? Are you hearing from all corners of the province, and what's the message you're getting? Well,
it's been a great mix of things, but I think that the consensus is that people are excited that a Human Rights Commission is going to be back in place, that it'll be looking at systematic discrimination in our community. One of the things that was quite remarkable for me to learn was the very last thing that the Human Rights Commission in 2002, before it was disbanded, was looking at the Indigenous communities, and it was looking at educational outcomes for First Nations and Métis and Inuit students in this province, and looking at why is it that the graduation rates were so low compared to the general population. So it was interesting for me to learn that that's still a challenge today. And that was what the commission was about to look at. So that was just one thing that struck me. I think there's been, I've met with groups who are advocating for better access to buildings and so on for people with disabilities. There was this lawyer who came to me at the Canadian Bar Association meeting, was talking about how he's privileged in the sense that he's a lawyer, he's got lots of opportunities, but he's in a wheelchair, and how he couldn't access the courtroom. He couldn't access the courtroom with his wheelchair, and then he couldn't actually get to his client in that courtroom because they didn't have access to an elevator. The elevator wasn't working. And so he was talking about, himself as a lawyer can't even give justice to somebody else because he was being denied access to the justice system. So, stories like that were quite remarkable. I've had an opportunity to talk to people with various types of disabilities. We often lump the disabilities community as one, but they are distinctly different. There's advocates from the deaf community who believe that we need to have better access to sign language and learnings and trainings for parents who have children who've lost their hearing. We've had people with wheelchairs talk about accessibility. One advocate was asking for us the commission to look at how we can do a best practices from all the municipalities on how to design our cities so that it's accessible for people with disabilities. And I thought that was great, something that the commission potentially could look at as some sort of overarching theme, working actively with municipalities on what is it going to look like when we design our future buildings. What are curb cuts going to look like when a person on a wheelchair needs to get off the street and it's too difficult because it just drops off. And so these are, I think the most fascinating thing for me was, when you have a general idea of discrimination, but when you hear from these communities about their lived experience and the things that they're actually facing and struggles they're facing, it gives you a whole new perception of all the challenges that are out there. So for me, the consultation process has been life-changing, to be honest. Having the opportunity to hear from so many groups from throughout the province and hearing about their challenges. And it reminded me of why this Human Rights Commission is needed. And we need to have a body independent of government that can tell government when it's wrong and when people are being discriminated, whether it's policy or not, but also can work with, let's say, the business community. I've had people from the business community come to us and say, I have a small business. I want to do the right thing. But guess what? I just don't have the financial capital to go and hire a high-powered firm or a consultant to help me figure out how to do the right thing. And so, that is my hope that the Human Rights Commission can be this place for small and medium-sized businesses to go and say, we want to make sure that our washrooms are accessible to people from LGBTQ or trans community. How do we do that? What's the best practices? We want to ensure our space is accessible for people from the LGBTQ community. TD Bank, for example, is doing great work on that issue. So why not take those learnings that there's happening, partner up, create these resources for the education system, resources for business, so that they don't have to pay for it first off, and there's a uniform best practice for everyone. So I think that the Commission plays a unique role in that it can bridge various communities, provide that independent advice, and I see it as a body that is very much a collaborating body as opposed to something that's a body that just punishes people, because I think we have to start at the premise. And what I've learned from this process is that majority of companies, majority of people want to do the right thing. They want their neighbors to have not face discrimination. They want to ensure that people with disabilities are treated in a manner that is respectful. That's the premise that I think we should start with the Human Rights Commission, that majority of the people want it. There's always elements of every society and business that maybe don't want to do the right thing. And so we have to disfranchised that, and we have to just concentrate on the main chunk of them. And so those are the learnings I've found of it, and I'm really looking forward to drafting this report and presenting it to the Attorney General.
Great. I want to ask you about proportional representation. The NDP government is preparing a consultation and a referendum on changing the voting system. I understand you support that. I wonder if you could tell us why do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I supported the motion in the House. I spoke strongly in favor of it. I want to thank the Attorney General for the work he's done. It's a major piece of our government's commitment to the public was to give them a voice on their democratic process. And so what we've done is to say we are going to have a vote next year. It'll be done mail-in ballot. I think, I've heard complaints from the BC Liberals that, oh, mail-in ballots, won't get the amount of turnout. Australia just had a mail-in ballot for equal rights for marriage. I think it was 80% turnout. So, I think that if we engage the public on this dialogue and we have a public conversation about our electoral system, I think people will be engaged, and I think that you will see a high participation rate, because fundamentally, we're not making a change to the electoral system. We're asking the public on what they think that this system should look like. Many people feel the system is not working for them, and more and more people are disconnected from it. And so I think that consulting the public is a good thing. Often we hear from the BC Liberals in that legislature, it's, oh, you're just, all you do is consult. Well, I don't see that as a negative. I see that as a positive. I heard clearly in the election and before that is that people want to be heard. They want their voice to be heard, and it's critically important for us as a government is to continue to listen, because when you stop listening, usually your time is up. And I believe the last government stopped listening, and so it's our responsibility to continue that conversation.
So the NDP government doesn't have an outright majority. They have to count on support from the 3 Green Party members on critical votes in the legislature. How do you think that's working with the Green Party, and do you think that says anything about proportional representation? Well,
I think it says a lot. I mean, this notion that we'll never get things done and there will always be conflict and the system will collapse, this fear-mongering that you hear out there on it is completely false. I think what I heard clearly in the election from people was that people just want us to get the work done. They don't care about, this person doesn't agree with it. They say, just work it out, figure it out. And so that's what we're doing right now with the Green Party. We're sitting down, we're having an adult conversation about issues. We don't agree on everything. We just don't. But that's okay. Everybody in my family doesn't agree on everything. But guess what? As a family, we come together and we sort these things out. And so I think, why should we think the political process can't be that way as well? And so we've had conversations with the Green Party. And by the way, a majority of people see us in the legislature and they see the confrontation and so on. It's not like that 90% of the time. There's a lot of agreement in the legislature. There are a lot of people in the opposition who have good ideas, and we have those discussions, and those things actually end up happening because of those conversations. And so I see that we're in an era, a new era of dialogue and a collaboration, and I think that's what the public wants. They want us to figure it out, and that's what our government is showing, is that it can be done. And so if proportional representation comes through, and there's alliances need to be formed, or coalitions, or whatever form that looks like, I think it's a healthy thing. And I think the other thing that I've been hearing a lot as well, these fringe parties, these extreme wing parties will end up getting seats. Well, I would say this, that I think that we have more of a challenge on the sense that we need to start addressing the core issues that these feelings exist. Why is it that people feel that way? And so I think the Human Rights Commission, again, can start addressing those things, and we'll find a way to talk with whoever's in government.
Great. I wanted to ask you about an issue you've been speaking out publicly about some suspicious grants that the BC Liberal government gave to some of their insiders right before the last election. Can you tell us about that, and specifically, why do you think it's important to shed light on it?
Yeah, well, it was brought to my attention through South Asian media, who just reported that they had heard this grant happened, and I started digging into it. And so the timeline on this is quite amazing. February 16th of this year, a group called New Horizons Society wrote to Minister Coleman, who's now the leader of the opposition, and said, we want to build a senior center and we would like money. March 1st, they actually became a society. They hadn't even been a society when they asked for the money. March 1st, they formally became a society. 2 weeks later, government gave them $200,000. Okay, no public announcement was made. I'm not sure
Normally there's much more due diligence, right?
So much due diligence. Any community group out there that has ever applied for money from a government knows that it's a big process to go through. And so, so it raised concerns with me, and it turns out that the members on the New Horizons Society board, the three of them, are strong Liberal supporters and have actively campaigned for them. So I've got concerns, and I'm going to continue to dig up on it.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you to the audience for joining us. We've been talking with Ravi Kahlon, the NDP MLA for Delta North.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.